Millionaire celebrated his mistress's birthday, while his pregnant wife was rushed to the ER. Regret came too late. Alexander Montgomery had it all: the money, the prestige, and a life that outsiders envied. From his ivory tower on the 12th floor of a shimmering high-rise, he basked in luxury while the rest of the city grappled with ordinary struggles. His wife Catherine, a gentle soul who was nearly 9 months pregnant, believed she had married a man with a heart as grand as his bank account. Little did she know that love could be fractured by ambition and lust. On a night meant to celebrate impending new life, Alexander's choice to celebrate in a very different way would unleash a series of events with ruinous consequences. Alexander Montgomery was the kind of name that appeared in financial journals under headlines like "Real Estate Magnate Doubles Portfolio Overnight" and "From Rags to Riches." How one man mastered the housing market, born into a humble household in the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Alexander's ascent to wealth was paved with resolute ambition. By the time he was 35, he had become one of the most notable property investors on the West Coast, a tall, broad-shouldered man with meticulously combed dark hair. Alexander wore success like a second skin. He drove sleek European cars, frequented members-only clubs, and dined at restaurants that required reservations weeks in advance. His friends and even casual acquaintances spoke in reverent tones, praising him as a business visionary. Yet behind the impressive facade lay a complex labyrinth of insecurities, desires, and hidden motives that only those closest to him ever glimpsed. Those who thought they knew him would say Alexander was a soft-hearted man beneath the power suits. They would mention the philanthropic events he attended and the large donations bearing his signature. But few realized that his generosity often served as a polished veneer, a strategic piece in his carefully constructed public image. Catherine, his wife, had glimpsed more of his inner workings than most. Catherine was a talented interior designer who had met Alexander on a chance encounter at a charity art auction. Their courtship was swift but sincere. He admired her refined taste and level-headed personality, a grounding presence to balance his more impulsive side. Catherine was the kind of woman who made a house into a sanctuary, and for Alexander, who had grown up in a chaotic home, her warmth felt like an oasis. Despite her husband's ceaseless pursuits of profit, Catherine trusted Alexander's vow to protect and cherish her. She believed he would be present when she needed him, most especially now as she approached the last month of a difficult pregnancy. In her mind, no matter how busy or driven he might be, he would never abandon her in a crisis. What she didn't know was that Alexander's heart was dangerously close to leaving her side already. To the outside world, their relationship still glowed with the sheen of newlywed bliss. At least that was the impression. Yet in truth, the cracks had started to form months before Catherine even became pregnant. As Alexander's wealth grew, so did his appetite for extravagance and new thrills. High-stakes deals made him hungry for excitement beyond the realm of property acquisitions. He had met Veronica Moore at a private investor gathering 6 months prior. She was introduced to him by a mutual acquaintance, Joshua Klein, a venture capitalist who had a penchant for bringing together the city's moneyed elite. Veronica was a model-turned-influencer, recognized for her flawless skin, shimmering raven hair, and the way her lips curled when she laughed. She exuded a subtle aura of danger mixed with youthful enthusiasm, a stark contrast to Catherine's gentle stability. At first, it was nothing more than a flirtation. Veronica recognized Alexander's name from the society pages and singled him out for conversation. Her long fingers danced on his forearm as she introduced herself, speaking in a soft but calculated voice. He felt a flutter in his gut, an electric signal he'd almost forgotten he could feel. In the following weeks, he told himself it was harmless to meet her for lunch, then for drinks, and eventually to indulge in a romantic weekend that Catherine never learned about. Those clandestine meetings turned into a full-blown affair. Despite his guilt, Alexander rationalized it as stress relief, something to keep him sharp and happy outside the demands of a high-pressure career. He made promises to Veronica that he never intended to keep dangling the idea that someday he could leave Catherine. In those moments, he even believed it might be true. Then Catherine became pregnant. Suddenly, the love triangle turned from game to ticking time bomb. Throughout her pregnancy, Catherine suffered from constant fatigue, morning sickness, and bouts of severe back pain. Her doctor, Dr. James Rutherford, who had delivered hundreds of babies over the years, watched her carefully. Catherine was carrying a boy, the child that Alexander had once claimed he wanted more than anything in the world. But to Catherine's heartbreak, as her belly swelled, Alexander seemed increasingly distant. One afternoon, Catherine's mother, Elizabeth Beaumont, visited the luxurious penthouse where the couple lived. She found Catherine alone, lying on the couch, struggling with a wave of dizziness. Elizabeth noticed a stack of unopened meal containers and an empty water glass. "Where's Alexander?" Elizabeth asked, concern evident in her tone. She could see the paleness in her daughter's cheeks. Catherine shrugged softly. "He had a meeting downtown. I'm sure he'll be back soon." She said it with as much confidence as she could muster, but her mother saw through her facade. Ever discreet, Elizabeth didn't press the issue. She stayed to chat, offering her daughter moral support and comfort. What she sensed was a creeping suspicion that Alexander wasn't just burying himself in work. Something else was consuming his time and attention. Meanwhile, Catherine struggled with the conflicting urges to defend her husband's absences and to beg him for more support. At each prenatal visit, she quietly hoped for Alexander to appear by her side to hold her hand as they examined ultrasound images. He missed most of them, citing urgent business matters. The glimpses he did catch, he treated like a casual afterthought, never fully acknowledging the monumental event about to occur. Despite it all, Catherine clung to the belief that once the baby arrived, Alexander would revert to the man she'd fallen in love with. While Catherine rested and tried to manage her precarious pregnancy, Alexander planned a grand event. But it wasn't for his wife or their unborn child. He was orchestrating the perfect birthday party for Veronica. The idea took shape in his mind. One late evening, after a night of heated passion, in a hotel suite, Veronica had casually mentioned how no one had ever truly celebrated her birthday in style. For a man who thrived on outdoing expectations, this was a challenge Alexander embraced wholeheartedly. He pored over potential venues, lavish rooftop clubs, chic private lounges, and even upscale art galleries. Eventually, he settled on a high-end private yacht moored in Sausalito, with a panoramic view of the Golden Gate Bridge. The party would be an exclusive gathering of her close friends and a handful of Alexander's associates who wouldn't snitch on him to Catherine. The cost, it didn't matter. He shelled out tens of thousands of dollars for catering by a Michelin-starred chef, a DJ flown in from New York, and exquisite decorations. He purchased an emerald necklace for Veronica that cost more than any piece of jewelry he'd ever given Catherine. Whenever pangs of guilt crept in, he buried them under the rationale that his wife didn't need flashy parties. She needed him to provide financial stability and a secure future. Love, after all, could manifest in different ways. He lied to himself. As the date drew near, Catherine's doctor recommended bed rest due to elevated blood pressure and signs of potential preeclampsia. Dr. Rutherford warned that any spike in stress could prove dangerous for her and the baby. Though Alexander knew the severity of Catherine's condition, he reassured her she'd be fine at home while he attended what he called a critical investor meeting. She tried to hide her disappointment, reminding herself that he was sacrificing now to build a better life for their family. The night of Veronica's birthday arrived on a balmy Friday evening, the sky streaked with pink and orange as the sun set over the bay. Dressed in a tailored midnight blue suit, Alexander glanced at his reflection in the mirror. A single thought nagged him. Catherine was home, heavily pregnant and unwell. But Veronica's calls and texts had bombarded him throughout the day, promising a night he would never forget. He stepped onto the yacht, greeted by a cascade of applause and revelry. Veronica wore a shimmering silver dress that hugged every curve. She rushed into his arms, pressing her lips against his in front of the small crowd. The moment felt intoxicating. The gentle rock of the boat, the glasses, clinking laughter, and the smell of salt water all melded into a euphoric haze. "Happy birthday, my love," Alexander whispered, dangling the velvet box containing the emerald necklace. Gasps and envious coos erupted from the bystanders as Veronica lifted her hair to let him clasp the necklace around her neck. She looked radiant, but a small voice inside Alexander wondered how Catherine was faring at home. Champagne flowed freely, and under the soft glow of twinkling lights strung along the yacht's rails, the celebration escalated. Music boomed, couples danced, and Alexander was welcomed as the star guest, Veronica's indispensable man. He felt a surge of pride and power. Any guilt he had managed to bury danced around the edges of his consciousness, overshadowed by Veronica's flirtatious smiles and the enthusiastic compliments of partygoers who admired his generosity. Midway through the evening, Veronica's best friend, a woman named Tatiana, clinked her glass to make an announcement. She draped an arm around Veronica and declared, "To the gorgeous birthday girl and her amazing man, Alexander May, tonight be just the beginning of a lifetime of special occasions for you two." The toast sent the crowd into a fresh frenzy of cheers. Alexander forced a smile, even as his gut twisted. A lifetime. The word echoed menacingly in his mind. Moments later, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Catherine had been battling relentless abdominal pain since late afternoon. At first, she dismissed it as normal pregnancy discomfort, but the pain intensified, bringing tears to her eyes. She could hardly stand, let alone walk. Panic began to set in as she clutched her phone, debating whether to call Alexander or an ambulance. Her breathing turned ragged. A sharp pang like a searing knife sliced through her belly, and she doubled over, collapsing onto her knees, heart pounding. Catherine managed to dial her mother. Elizabeth arrived quickly. She had been on her way to drop off a homemade meal. One look at Catherine's pale face convinced her they needed immediate medical help. "Alexander," Catherine croaked as Elizabeth helped her up. "I've tried calling him. He's not answering." Elizabeth answered, worry creasing her features. They rushed Catherine to the ER, where Dr. Rutherford soon arrived. The baby's heartbeat appeared erratic, and Catherine's blood pressure had skyrocketed. Fear curled around her like a suffocating blanket as doctors and nurses scrambled to stabilize her condition. When the phone in her purse rang, Elizabeth snatched it, hoping it was Alexander. Instead, it was a real estate broker from Alexander's office. Elizabeth bit back her frustration, uncertain whether to confide the dire situation. She left a voicemail on Alexander's phone, her voice trembling. "Please, Alexander, get to the hospital. Catherine needs you, the baby. We're not sure if he's okay. This is serious." Catherine felt a swirl of dread in her mind, an undercurrent of betrayal, mixing with terror for her unborn child. She tried to cling to the hope that Alexander would charge through the hospital doors any moment now. The minutes passed excruciatingly slowly, and reality began to set in. Alexander was nowhere to be found. On the yacht, Alexander's phone vibrated continuously, but he was lost in the rhythm of the music, intoxicated by champagne and enthralled by Veronica's lavish attentions. Around 11 p.m., he stepped away from the crowd to take a quick breath. Noticing then that he had multiple missed calls and voicemails, he pressed the phone to his ear, weaving past dancing guests to find a quieter corner. The first voicemail he heard was from Elizabeth Catherine, was in the ER. His heart stopped. The next was from Dr. Rutherford's office, urging him to come urgently. Terror slammed into him like a train. He rushed back to Veronica, who was laughing with a small circle of her friends. "I have to go." He choked out, his eyes wide with alarm. What Veronica's smile vanished. She reached out, grabbing his arm. "You can't leave now. We're about to cut the cake." Alexander stared at her in disbelief. The conflicting emotions roared within him. Did she really not care about Catherine or the baby? The question was absurd. Of course, Veronica had no emotional stake in Catherine's well-being, yet the magnitude of his betrayal and the reality that he might lose his family came crashing down. "I'm sorry," he muttered, shaking off her grasp. He stormed across the deck, shoving past partygoers to disembark as quickly as he could. The crowd's celebration continued behind him, their laughter echoing in the night, while guilt throbbed in his chest. Alexander jumped into his sleek sports car and tore through the streets. White-knuckled, he dialed the hospital. Elizabeth answered her voice raw, with a mixture of anger and desperation. "I'm on my way," Alexander shouted into the phone, adrenaline surging through him. But as he raced toward the hospital, the realization of what he had done sank in, burning and humiliating. He might have abandoned Catherine in her most vulnerable moment to fulfill the shallow whims of a mistress. Alexander barreled through the hospital doors, ignoring the stares of startled staff and visitors. He found Elizabeth seated in the waiting room, her eyes red from crying. She glared at him, lips pressed into a thin line. Before she could speak, Dr. Rutherford emerged with a somber expression. Alexander the doctor began drawing him aside. "Catherine's condition is critical. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. We managed to stabilize her for now. We had to perform an emergency C-section. Your son is in the NICU." Alexander's heart pounded. A swirl of relief and dread washed over him. "Is she okay? And the baby?" "The baby is very premature, but we're doing everything we can." "Catherine is sedated. We'll know more in the next few hours." Nodding, Alexander ran a hand through his hair. His throat felt parched. He could barely formulate coherent thoughts. The memory of Veronica's party flashed in his mind, leaving a nauseating taste in his mouth. He turned to Elizabeth, preparing to apologize, but words failed him. Elizabeth shook her head, tears simmering in her eyes. "If we lose them," she whispered harshly. "It's on your conscience, Alexander." Without giving him a chance to reply, she turned and walked away. Alexander swallowed hard, then sank into a hospital chair. The bright fluorescent lights overhead felt garish, and the beeping machines in the distance hammered home a truth he couldn't deny: he had failed as a husband and as a father. The hours in the waiting room stretched into a blur of tension and regret. Alexander drifted in and out of a daze, calling his assistant to postpone all business meetings indefinitely. His phone buzzed with messages from Veronica, angry, frantic demands for an explanation. He silenced it, focusing on the corridor leading to the ICU. That hallway was his portal to possible redemption. In the early morning hours, Dr. Rutherford stepped out again, beckoning Alexander into a private consultation room. The doctor's exhaustion was evident, but there was a glimmer of optimism in his eyes. Catherine's surgery went as well as could be expected, Dr. Rutherford explained. She's stable now. But it was close. Her blood pressure shot through the roof, a severe case of preeclampsia. We delivered the baby just in time. He's in the NICU, receiving respiratory support. The next 48 hours are crucial. Alexander felt his knees weaken. He sank into a chair. Relief coursed through him, but it was tainted by the bitter knowledge of why Catherine had faced her ordeal alone. "Can I see her?" he croaked. "Briefly. She's in recovery, but you need to be calm. She shouldn't be under any stress." Alexander nodded mutely, and Dr. Rutherford led him down a sterile hallway into a small recovery room where Catherine lay unconscious, hooked to machines that monitored her vitals. Her face was almost translucent. Her lips chapped, and her once lively eyes were closed. A swirl of tubes and IV lines snaked around her arm. Alexander's chest constricted at the sight of his wife, so vulnerable. He slipped a hand into hers, feeling the coldness of her skin. Tears gathered behind his eyelids, but he blinked them back, overwhelmed by guilt and sorrow. "This is all because of me." He thought the words echoing in his mind, like a condemnation. Catherine stirred several hours later, her eyelids fluttering open slowly. Alexander was dozing in a plastic chair next to her bed. His suit wrinkled, his once polished shoes scuffed. He jolted awake when she whispered his name. Alexander. Her voice was hoarse. He leaned forward, taking her hand gently. "I'm here," he said, forcing what he hoped was a reassuring smile. The doctor said, "You're going to be okay. Our baby is in the NICU, but he's fighting." Catherine's brow furrowed, her gaze drifting toward the door. "You came," she murmured, as though it were a revelation. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I was afraid you wouldn't." For a moment, Alexander couldn't speak. He cupped her cheek, wanting to explain that he'd been at Veronica's party. The truth stuck in his throat. Like poison, a single lie escaped. Instead, "I got here as soon as I could." She watched him, tears still sliding down her face. Her mind was a fog of exhaustion and medication, but even in that state, she felt the chill of something amiss. The tension in Alexander's posture, the guilt in his eyes. She registered the signals like cracks in the foundation of her reality. Alexander breathed heavily, words tumbling in his mind, confessions, apologies and pleas for forgiveness. But the moment she closed her eyes, drifting back into a medicated sleep, he realized he was powerless to go back in time. Days turned into a week, and Catherine slowly recovered her strength. The baby, whom they named Adam, remained in the NICU under close observation. Each day, Catherine would shuffle down the hall, aided by a nurse, to see her tiny son in his incubator. Alexander accompanied her, placing a tentative hand on her shoulder, trying to offer support. She accepted it, though silently her trust in him wavered. Meanwhile, Veronica's calls escalated from uncertain to furious. She left voice messages that swung from scornful accusations to tearful pleas. Alexander tried to appease her through text messages, promising to call when he had a moment. But each time he attempted to focus on her, a wave of guilt washed over him, especially when he saw Catherine cradle their fragile infant son. Finally tired of his evasions, Veronica walked uninvited into the hospital lobby one afternoon, dressed in a sleek coat, wearing the emerald necklace Alexander had given her. She confronted him near the elevator. "Where have you been?" "You won't even return my calls," she hissed, eyes scanning the corridor in case Catherine or her family emerged. Alexander stiffened, heart pounding. "I told you this is a delicate time for my family. My son is in the NICU. It's serious." Veronica's lip curled. And what about me? I'm just supposed to wait around while you play doting father and husband. A hot mix of anger and shame boiled inside Alexander. I'm not playing, he growled softly. My baby almost died. My wife almost died. She studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing. So that's it then. You're running back to your wife. I don't know what I'm doing, Alexander confessed. He felt cornered, suffocated by the chain of events he had set in motion. I need time. Veronica's expression hardened. I'm not going to be a secret forever. You promised me more. Alexander, I'm not going to stand by while you pretend this never happened. She spun on her heel and stormed out, leaving him trembling. The confrontation felt like a thunderbolt, revealing how deeply enmeshed he was in this web of deceit. The entire situation had careened beyond his control, and the final unraveling was fast approaching. Later that afternoon, Catherine was resting, and Elizabeth had gone to fetch her some tea. Alexander stepped out to the hallway, spotting Elizabeth returning with a small paper cup of steaming liquid. Their eyes locked. She motioned for him to follow her around the corner. She waited until they were alone, then snapped. I saw that woman wearing the emerald necklace. Do you think I'm blind? I know you gave Catherine an emerald ring for your anniversary last year. I know emerald is special to her. She told me it symbolizes rebirth for both of you. Now this woman is wearing the same gemstone. Alexander's stomach dropped. Elizabeth saw Veronica. His mind scrambled. That's just a coincidence. He lied lamely. But Elizabeth wasn't fooled. She lashed out with a venom he'd never heard from her before. You disgust me. My daughter nearly died while you were off on some yacht with your... She couldn't even bring herself to say the word. Alexander's face flushed. He swallowed hard, struggling to maintain composure. Please keep your voice down. Catherine doesn't need this kind of stress right now. Elizabeth's nostrils flared. Stress. You're worried about stress? Where was that concern when she was rushed to the hospital alone? Her voice shook with fury. I won't tell her yet. But you need to fix this. Alexander, fix it, or I will do whatever it takes to protect my daughter from you. She marched away, leaving him trapped in a vortex of shame. He knew Elizabeth's threat was real. He also knew Catherine's health was too fragile to handle the blow of discovering his affair right now. Still a part of him recognized that the day of reckoning was near. Catherine was discharged from the hospital after another week of cautious observation. Baby Adam, though still fragile, showed steady improvement and would remain in the NICU a bit longer. Alexander arranged for Catherine to recuperate in their penthouse, hiring a private nurse to monitor her condition. Once home, the rift between them became painfully clear. Alexander tried to help her settle in, fluffing pillows and adjusting the temperature, but Catherine's eyes were distant. She sensed his strain, the unspoken tension that crackled in the air. One night, as she lay in bed, restlessly flipping through a baby magazine, she finally confronted him. Who was that woman in the hallway of the hospital? She asked, her voice quiet, but pointed. Alexander froze. The memory of Veronica's sudden appearance at the hospital burned his mind. She must have passed Catherine in the corridor at some point, or perhaps a nurse told her about the strange visitor. He tried to craft a diplomatic response. She's just someone who works with one of my business associates. She came by to discuss something about a contract. Catherine watched him closely. She said nothing for a moment, letting the silence speak volumes. Then she murmured, Alexander, I'm tired, I can't do this now. Her voice was resigned rather than accusatory, but it stung all the same. In truth, Catherine didn't have the strength for a confrontation. Not yet. Her body still ached from surgery. Her heart, battered by doubts, needed time to muster the energy for the storm she suspected was coming. 2 weeks later, baby Adam was well enough to leave the NICU. Alexander and Catherine arrived at the hospital with a new car seat, tension still threading between them as they prepared to take their son home for the first time. Catherine's hands shook. She felt an odd mix of joy and dread. She couldn't shake the feeling that her family unit was fractured, overshadowed by secrets. They gently placed Adam in the back seat. Adjusting the straps, Alexander hovered over, eager to help. Catherine forced a smile. Whatever Alexander had done, Adam needed a father. She would do her best to shield her newborn from negativity. Yet as they drove back to the penthouse, Catherine peered through the window at the passing city lights, her mind swirling. She recalled the nights Alexander missed her calls, her mother's stiff, polite interactions with him, the hushed phone calls he tried to conceal. Who is that woman? Why was she at the hospital, back home? Alexander carried Adam inside. They stood in the entryway, marred by an awkward silence. A baby's cry broke the tension, and Catherine instinctively reached for her child. "I'll set up the crib," Alexander murmured. "The nurse can help you with Adam." But Catherine shook her head. She wanted to do it herself. Something inside her yearned for control, for a sense of independence from the man who had repeatedly let her down. She gingerly walked to the baby's room, a space she had decorated lovingly months ago. Fairy lights, soft pastel wallpaper, with tiny elephants, plush rugs, every detail, chosen with anticipation of a happy family. Now it felt like a stage set for a play that might never see an opening night a week after Adam's homecoming. Catherine found herself alone in the living room. The baby was asleep in his crib, and Alexander had stepped out, presumably to handle yet another urgent business matter. She heard her phone buzz, revealing a text from her mother. "He's still seeing her. I'm sorry, but I had to tell you. I followed him to her place today. He's leaving now." Cold horror coiled in Catherine's stomach. She'd suspected it, but seeing it confirmed left her reeling, pulse thundering. She dialed Alexander. This time he picked up. "Is something wrong?" he asked, sounding rushed. Catherine felt her throat tighten with anger. "Come home now, or don't come home at all." Her tone must have conveyed the seriousness. He stumbled over his words, then agreed. Within 30 minutes, he was at the penthouse. Catherine stood in the living room, arms folded across her chest, tears burning her eyes. He opened the door, wearing a conflicted expression, his shoulders tensed under his tailored suit. "Catherine, don't lie to me," she whispered, voice trembling. "My mother saw you with her. Who is she?" Alexander hesitated, his eyes flickering with panic. In that brief moment, Catherine realized the entire truth. "He's been cheating on me for months," she steeled herself. "You owe me honesty. Alexander, I almost died, and Adam is still so fragile. If you have any respect left for me, tell me the truth." Defeated, Alexander slumped onto the couch. He ran a hand over his face. "Her name is Veronica. It started before you got pregnant. I never meant for it to go this far." Catherine's world blurred. She grasped the edge of a table for support, dizzy with betrayal. "So it wasn't a fling," she spat. "You've been with her this whole time." Alexander swallowed hard. "I tried to end it after you got pregnant. But she kept pushing. And then things got complicated at the worst times. I told her I needed space, but she wouldn't let go." A bitter laugh burst from Catherine's face. "Let me guess, you took her on a yacht, showered her with gifts, and told me you had urgent work. That's not needing space. That's living a double life." Alexander had no defense. He bowed his head, tears of frustration and regret pressing at his eyes. "I'm sorry," he croaked. "I know it's meaningless to say it now, but I am." Catherine sank into a chair, staring at him, tears rolling unchecked down her cheeks. "You left me alone on the night I was rushed to the ER to celebrate her birthday, didn't you?" He nodded, shame contorting his features. "Yes." She closed her eyes. The realization of how close she and the baby had come to tragedy that night stabbed at her. The pain of abandonment fused with heartbreak until she felt numb. After a long silence, she spoke through clenched teeth. "If you want to stay in Adam's life, you'll need to see a marriage counselor with me. But I'm not guaranteeing anything. Right now, I can't even look at you." He nodded, words failing him. Catherine stood up, turning away, cradling herself as though warding off a chill. How could he do this to us? It was a question that would haunt her for a long time. In the ensuing days, Alexander moved into a guest room by Catherine's request. She refused to let him touch her, speak to her casually, or pretend that life could simply go back to normal. Their communication boiled down to essential matters about Adam's care and upcoming appointments. The only ray of light in the gloom was their son. Adam grew stronger, each day graduating from specialized feedings to nursing normally. Catherine found solace in caring for him, while Alexander's attempts to help were timid, overshadowed by guilt. Elizabeth visited, often watching Alexander like a hawk. She had urged Catherine to file for separation, but Catherine pleaded for time. She couldn't handle a legal battle on top of everything else. She needed to see if there was any trace of the man she had once loved beneath Alexander's betrayal. Meanwhile, Alexander cut off all contact with Veronica. He changed his personal phone number, blocked her on social media, and instructed his associates that she was no longer welcome at any of his events. Veronica's messages, relayed through mutual acquaintances, oscillated between anger and heartbreak. Alexander braced himself, fully aware that the fallout might get worse if Veronica decided to speak publicly. He realized he was teetering on a career-ruining scandal, but he no longer cared about his public image as much as he once did. His priority now was to salvage what he could of his marriage and be a father to Adam. At Catherine's insistence, they began attending marriage counseling sessions with Dr. Camilla Yang, a soft-spoken but piercingly insightful therapist. The sessions were tense from the start. Catherine recounted her loneliness, her fear during the emergency, and her sense of utter betrayal. Alexander spoke of his insecurities, his thirst for excitement, and how he had been seduced by the danger of living two lives. Each time he confessed something about his affair, Catherine cringed, tears brimming in her eyes. Dr. Young gently coaxed them to speak openly about their hurt and confusion. She guided Catherine to express her resentment and heartbreak in clear terms, while urging Alexander to dig into the root causes of his actions, rather than offering excuses. During one particularly heated session, Catherine exploded, "You nearly let us die alone." Alexander: "For what a party? A fling, something exciting." Alexander flinched at the venom in her words. Tears smeared Catherine's mascara as she continued. "I gave you everything I had, my trust, my love, a child, and you threw it away for her." He bowed his head, overwhelmed. "I hate myself for it," he whispered. "I can't take back what happened. But I want to be here for you and Adam." "Tell me how," Dr. Yang interjected. "Catherine, you're entitled to be angry. And Alexander, it will take more than apologies. You need to rebuild trust through consistent actions over time. Are you both committed to that process?" Catherine said nothing for a moment. Then she sniffled, nodding slightly. She looked at Alexander and spoke softly. "I can't promise forgiveness, but I can promise to try for our son's sake." Just as Alexander took his first steps toward redemption, A new blow shook their precarious reconciliation. A tabloid site, Glam City Gossip, published an exposé titled Millionaire Real Estate, Tycoon's Scandalous Affair, celebrating Mistress's birthday, while wife is hospitalized. The article featured blurred photos of Alexander and Veronica on the yacht, images clearly taken by party attendees or staff who had sold the story. The article quickly went viral, replete with salacious details about Veronica's background, the expensive gifts, and the rumor that Alexander's wife had been rushed to the ER on that same night. The tabloid speculated about Catherine's health and whether the child had survived. Social media exploded with a storm of condemnation, gossip, and speculation. Elizabeth, furious, called Catherine the moment she saw the article. Catherine felt her stomach drop. She realized the private humiliation she had suffered was now public knowledge, open for scrutiny and mockery. With trembling hands, she shut off her phone after reading the barrage of hateful and pitying comments online. Alexander, already battling guilt, went pale when his public relations manager called him in a panic. The biggest real estate deal of his career was hanging in the balance as investors questioned his integrity. Alexander realized that the final consequence of his betrayal had arrived. He rushed home to find Catherine in tears, the penthouse flooded with harsh sunlight that did nothing to brighten the mood. "Why couldn't you just stay faithful?" she sobbed, her voice shaking. "Now everyone knows. I can't even open my social media without seeing people's pity or scorn." Alexander reached out to comfort her, but she recoiled. The sense of shame intensified. He had not only hurt her, but also sullied their family name in the public eye. News cameras and paparazzi now lingered around the entrance to the penthouse building. The doorman, Jorge Delgado, a kindly older man, did his best to shield the Montgomery family from the flashing cameras. But the harassment only grew worse. Catherine felt trapped. Even visits to the pediatrician were fraught with reporters shouting questions about Alexander's affair. She and Adam were forced to use private entrances and scheduled times when the building was less crowded. The real estate community buzzed with rumors that Alexander's largest investors were pulling out of future projects. Some philanthropic boards he was part of considered asking him to step down due to the scandal. For the first time in Alexander's life, his unstoppable ambition collided with the real consequences of moral failure. One day, a representative from a prominent philanthropic organization, the Silver Oak Foundation, visited Alexander personally. Her name was Irene Fletcher. She had known Catherine from charity design events. With sad eyes, she explained that given the negative publicity, the board would prefer if Alexander withdrew from the foundation. She apologized, but Alexander knew that any protest would be futile. He escorted Irene out, a hollow feeling in his chest. The glitz he had built around himself was crumbling, and he had only himself to blame. Fed up with the media circus, Elizabeth confronted her son-in-law. She demanded he arrange for Catherine and Adam to move somewhere private and serene until the uproar died down. Initially, Catherine resisted, not wanting to uproot Adam. But when paparazzi began shouting at them during a hospital checkup for Adam's immunizations, she realized it was no longer a safe environment for her child. Alexander agreed. He owned a secluded country estate 2 hours from the city. The property had remained largely unused, a grand rustic manor purchased as a real estate investment. Catherine agreed to move there with Adam, and Elizabeth would join her. Alexander was to remain in the city to weather the scandal, alone deal with his business affairs, and only visit on scheduled weekends if Catherine consented. When Catherine and Adam left for the estate, Alexander felt like someone had carved out a piece of his heart. He tried to tell Catherine how sorry he was, how he wished he could turn back time. She simply looked at him with sad eyes and said, We'll see if you can truly change." In the weeks that followed, Alexander was left alone in the penthouse. His nights were sleepless, haunted by images of Catherine's tears and Adam's tiny face. He threw himself into damage control at work, attempting to salvage partnerships and stave off lawsuits. Some tabloids claimed his affair had misled investors, though these accusations were tenuous. He also received an unexpected call from Veronica. He debated ignoring it, but eventually curiosity and a sense of finality made him pick up. Her voice was icy. "I just wanted you to know. I'm leaving California. I lost so many brand deals after that article. People blame me, call me a home wrecker. My agent said I need to lay low for a while." She paused, swallowing a bitter laugh. "We're both paying for what we did. Alexander." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he murmured. For once he wasn't trying to placate her. He truly felt regret for their mutual downfall. The call ended, leaving him alone with the monstrous silence of his penthouse. Every Saturday, Alexander drove out to the country estate with groceries and supplies for Adam. At first, Catherine barely let him inside the house. She greeted him on the porch, accepted the bags, and retreated. But as weeks turned into months, her resentment, while still strong, began to soften, just enough to allow limited interaction. One mild spring afternoon, Alexander found Catherine in the garden, rocking Adam in her arms. The baby babbled, pointing at clouds overhead. Catherine watched Adam, a gentle smile on her face. Alexander approached cautiously, hands in his pockets. "How is he?" Alexander asked, quietly, standing a few feet away. She glanced up, her expression cool but not as hostile. "He's growing fast. Doctor says he's hitting all the right milestones." She looked down at their son, affection shining in her eyes. Alexander took a seat on a nearby bench. Catherine didn't stop him. For a few minutes, they simply existed, in silence. Parents united by love for their child. Then Adam fussed, squirming, until Catherine offered him her finger to grip. Alexander, emboldened by the moment, leaned closer. "May I hold him?" Catherine hesitated, then slowly placed the baby in his arms. Alexander cradled Adam gently. Feeling the fragile weight of new life, Adam reached up, tiny fingers wrapping around Alexander's thigh. A small giggle bubbled from the baby's lips. Catherine watched, her eyes misting, as she saw father and son share a tender moment. That evening, Catherine allowed Alexander to stay for dinner. Elizabeth observed warily, ready to intervene if any argument erupted. To everyone's relief, dinner was subdued, but civil. Over a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, they discussed Adam's progress and Catherine's continuing health checks. Elizabeth stayed mostly silent, her trust in Alexander still at rock bottom. When dinner ended, Catherine excused herself to put Adam to sleep. Alexander lingered in the living room, gazing at an old family photo on the mantel. Catherine and him, their faces beaming in the early days of marriage. Elizabeth entered the room, arms folded. "You might be fooling Catherine with your visits and groceries, but not me," she whispered sharply. "If you break her heart again, I'll make sure you never see." Adam Alexander nodded, turning to face her with subdued humility. "I deserve your anger. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want Catherine to heal." Elizabeth searched his face, finding genuine remorse. A part of her softened, but not enough to lift her guard. She left without another word. Alexander sighed. He knew winning Elizabeth's forgiveness might never happen, and he didn't blame her. His focus was on Catherine and Adam. If he could prove himself worthy of their trust, that would be enough. Catherine finished putting Adam to sleep and found Alexander waiting outside the nursery. Her heart fluttered with confusion. He looked vulnerable, as though all his worldly armor had been stripped away. "I was going to drive back tonight," he said. "But I wanted to say something first." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry for everything," he began. "For betraying you, for lying to you, and for abandoning you when you needed me the most. I know I can't erase what I did. I want you to know how much I regret it. Not for my own comfort, but because you deserve so much better." Catherine studied him, her eyes damp. She wanted to lash out, to tell him no apology could fix the past, but she sensed sincerity in his voice. Time, she thought. He needs to show me change over time. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. "I still don't know if I can forgive you. But I appreciate the apology." He nodded, exhaling as though releasing a great weight. "I'll call you later about Adam's appointments," he said softly. She gave him a faint nod, and he left. The gesture was small, but it was the first peaceful exchange they'd had in a long time. Over the following months, Alexander's visits became more frequent. He arrived with groceries, flowers for Catherine, though she often left them in a corner without comment, and baby supplies for Adam. They continued their marriage counseling via virtual sessions, with Dr. Yang urging them to identify moments of progress and address lingering resentments. Alexander worked diligently to repair his business reputation, but not at the expense of quality time with his family. He often drove out on weekdays, taking calls from the country estate's porch so he could be near Catherine and Adam. Bit by bit, Catherine allowed him closer. They started having genuine conversations again, not just about Adam, but about their shared memories and future plans. One afternoon, they took Adam for a stroll around the estate's sprawling grounds. The baby giggled at the rustle of leaves and the sight of butterflies fluttering by. Catherine slipped her hand around Alexander's arm for balance on the uneven terrain. The contact was brief, but it felt like an unspoken acknowledgement that she no longer viewed him as a complete stranger. Despite their progress, Catherine wrestled with nightmares of the night she was rushed to the ER. She'd awaken in a cold sweat, imagining Alexander still dancing on that yacht while she clung to life. She confided in Dr. Yang that her fear was that if she fully forgave Alexander, she'd be left vulnerable again. Dr. Yang advised forgiveness isn't about vulnerability. It's a choice to let go of anger for your own healing. But reconciliation requires trust. And trust can only grow if both parties nurture it every day. Catherine took those words to heart. She began writing in a journal, listing instances when Alexander showed genuine care, comforting Adam during a fever, helping Elizabeth fix a broken fence, being transparent about his whereabouts at all times. These small acts formed a mosaic of renewed trust, though cracks still remained. One summer evening, months after the scandal first erupted, Alexander organized a simple family dinner under the estate's arbor. Twinkling fairy lights adorned the trellis, and a gentle breeze wafted the scent of jasmine. Catherine noticed his nervous energy all day, but she chalked it up to the usual tension of their precarious relationship. Elizabeth joined them, holding Adam, while Catherine and Alexander served food. The atmosphere was peaceful, a far cry from the bitter confrontations of the past. After dinner, Alexander cleared his throat, looking at Catherine. "I want to show you something." She followed him to a small table, set near a cluster of roses. He opened a box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "A new wedding band. I know our marriage vows were broken by me," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "If you can find it in your heart to continue this journey with me, I'd like to renew those vows when you're ready. This ring is a symbol of a fresh start. If you want that." Catherine stared at the ring. tears filling her eyes. She remembered the joyous day they first exchanged vows, how pure their love had seemed. The ring glinted in the soft light, beckoning her to decide whether their story was worth continuing. A silent moment stretched between them. Then Catherine gently closed the box, pressing it back into his hand. "Not yet," she whispered, blinking away tears. But maybe someday. Alexander's expression wavered a mix of disappointment and respect. "I understand," he murmured. He slipped the box into his pocket, acknowledging that healing was a process, not a quick fix. In the days that followed, Catherine found herself reflecting on all they had been through. She wrote a letter to Alexander, something Dr. Yang had suggested as an exercise in expressing emotions without the immediate tension of a face-to-face conversation. In the letter, she shared the depth of her pain, her fears, and the delicate hope she still harbored. Alexander responded with his own letter, admitting that he'd never felt worthy of love, that his endless pursuit of riches and thrills was a cover for deep insecurity. He promised to keep working on himself, whether or not she ultimately forgave him. This exchange of letters became a turning point. Catherine felt a shift in her heart. She recognized that Alexander's remorse was genuine and that his actions were aligning with his words. While the memory of his betrayal still hurt, she realized she wanted to see if they could rebuild a life together. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Catherine quietly told Alexander she would agree to a small vow renewal ceremony. Her condition was that it remain private, just immediate family and Dr. Yang as a witness. She didn't want the pomp of society or any flashy show of wealth. This ceremony would be about them and their child. They gathered at the estate under the same arbor, where Alexander had proposed a new start months before. Catherine wore a simple white dress, holding baby Adam in her arms. Elizabeth stood close, tears brimming in her eyes, unsure until the last moment if she could accept this reconciliation, but ultimately deciding to support her daughter's choice. Alexander wore a humble suit, no flashy cufflinks or lavish accessories. Dr. Yang offered a few words about love, trust, and the courage to rebuild. Then Alexander and Catherine recited new vows, promises forged in the crucible of pain and repentance. "I promise to stand by you," Alexander said, voice unsteady with emotion in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow. "I promise to uphold our family above all else, to share the burdens and the blessings. I will never again forsake you or our son for my own selfish desires." Catherine, tears glistening, replied, "I promise to do my best to forgive, to offer you a chance to prove your devotion. I promise to protect our child and our family with all my strength, and I promise to open my heart to the possibility of healing." They exchanged rings, a new set symbolizing rebirth. Adam gurgled happily in Elizabeth's arms as the breeze rustled through the estate's gardens. There was no triumphant music, no thunderous applause, just a quiet acceptance of two people who chose to fight for a love that had nearly been destroyed. Life didn't magically become perfect after the vow renewal. Old wounds took time to fully heal. Catherine still experienced waves of hurt, especially whenever she recalled the night she nearly died alone in the hospital. Alexander still struggled with guilt, seeking therapy on his own to address his insecurities and reckless pursuit of thrill. Yet slowly, they wove a new tapestry of shared experiences, raising Adam, planning a more balanced approach to Alexander's business, and nurturing the fragile bond they had vowed to protect. At times, Catherine wondered if she had made the right choice, but then she would see Alexander cradling Adam, reading him a bedtime story, tears in his eyes, as he thanked fate for a second chance. and she would feel a cautious kind of peace. Their story was not one of fairy tale perfection, but of resilience. It carried the scars of betrayal and the weight of regret. Yet amid the lingering pain, hope flickered. The vow renewal was not an ending, but a tentative new beginning. In the quiet corners of their shared life, they found humility, empathy, and eventually a deep, abiding love more genuine than the illusions of their past. From the highest peaks of fortune to the darkest depths of betrayal, Alexander and Catherine's story proves that trust is as fragile as it is vital. Their journey into heartbreak and back again reveals the raw truth. Wealth and power mean nothing without genuine love and loyalty. In the end, they fought for their family, forging a new bond that carries both the painful memory of mistakes and the promise of a hopeful future. Their story continues beyond the vow renewal, one step at a time, as they mend what was once broken. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous ride of love, deception, regret, and redemption. If you found their story as captivating and emotional as we did, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more gripping tales that remind us just how fragile and precious our bonds truly are. Together, let's explore the extraordinary power of second chances.